What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the seventh installment edition, whatever you want to call it, of the Big Five Pod. I'm your co-host, Kyle Morello, and of course, next to me, the one and only Jake Copestick. How we doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. I'm ready to talk about the Big Five doubleheader. Kind of some mixed feelings, I guess, amongst like the media, amongst people that were there, amongst basketball fans in the city. But I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I hope that that's a thing they continue to do in the future. And it's not something that we have to wait another 6+ years to see again. So excited to break that down. But I had a good time Wednesday night. Definitely eager to talk about it.
Yeah, and obviously I was in attendance too, and it was a lot of fun. I'll say one thing before we get into kind of the other things we want to talk about with the event itself, but I think inside the venue they did a good job, like making sure everybody really felt like the event had the importance that it was supposed to. The Inquirer was there and they were handing out these commemorative newspapers, and I got one too. There were some articles written in there, one of them by our friend Sam Cohen. So shout out to Sam. Um, it was really cool. And just being in there was it was a heck of an environment. That's kind of where the truck stopped on that though, because listen, we have to talk about the turnout. Before we even get into any of the games, and the games were really good, but the turnout was a little disappointing, I gotta say. It's not really that big of a gym itself, which is part of the reason why it's so why it's so loved. It's because it's so intimate and it's like this old school kind of place to play, but it was not filled up at all, especially for the later game too. I think for the Temple of Sal game, there was a little more people because it was a little earlier, at least like toward the second half. But once it got to later, it was a little bleak. Personally, I think it was because it was on a Wednesday night and the first game started at 6 p.m. and people are still getting off work and whatnot. The next time this does get played, it should definitely be on a weekend. It also shouldn't be 6 years in the future, like you said. But I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. What did you think of the lack of people in the stands?
So to sum it up quickly, I mean, obviously, I think it's disappointing for an event like that. They haven't had a Big Five doubleheader in a while, thinking that people could get two games for the price of one. You would think more people would show up to that, but there's a bunch of different factors that I think go into this. Feel like I could spend a lot of time talking about it, but just to kind of couple hit on a bunch of different ones here. So specifically talking about like the event itself, yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think we have this on a Saturday. It's a different story, but a couple other things too. It sounded like that there wasn't really transportation provided for students. There was a very, very low student turnout, whether that be Penn or any of the other schools, especially Penn, being that, obviously he was on their campus. It was kind of disappointing. But with St. Joe's, pretty sure you could count on two hands how many students were in the student section. And then same for Temple and LaSalle as well. LaSalle, I thought actually a pretty solid student
Was
turnout.
just
I'm
gonna
not
say,
sure
yeah.
if they got down there themselves, but it doesn't sound like there was a bus for everybody. I remember my freshman year at LaSalle when they played Villanova. It was on a Saturday. It was a 2 o'clock game on ESPN. It was obviously Ashley Howard's first year. He's playing against Jay Wright, who had just won a championship. Ashley Howard, a part of that team, then goes over to LaSalle. It was a big game in the city. It was a great turnout, but they bust everybody down there. And I can't forget if it was free or maybe we paid $5 a student for up and back to kind of cover the cost for LaSalle a little bit. But regardless, they provided that for you. And to have it on a Wednesday, like you said, I think we switched to Saturday, and also the timing, not only during the week, but I think of the school year as well. People are just getting back from break, and me and you can both attest to this. You being an alumni, me, coming to the end of my college tenure here. This is a really, really busy time for college kids right now.
It is. It's final season.
It's final season projects, presentations, exams, all that stuff. It's between two holidays. There's a lot going on with that. It's just a very busy time for college students as well. So I think maybe you move this to January when students are first back on campus, where this is a very beginning of the season thing. You kind of kick off the college basketball season doing this in early November. Maybe it's a little bit easier for people to get there. But another thing I want to point out that's kind of unfortunate, and it's just what the reality is with the Big Five now. Villanova is obviously the dominant program. And all the four other schools have kind of fallen behind them. The last 6 years, you look at Nova, obviously with kind of the golden age of their program and Jay Wright coaching there. Last 6 years, 3 Final Fours, 2 championships. They went on a 25 game. Now, this isn't 6 years ago. I'm talking a little bit prior, but a 25 game Big Five win streak that Penn actually ended at their place in 2019. And then after that, Nova goes on to win 9 more Big Five games in a row, some of which had happened during, COVID, those cancellations. But and then they lose to Temple this year, but that was the first one that they had lost in 3 years. So you have one program that's very dominant. That's kind of, I don't want to say keeping the Big Five relevant, but that's the most nationally relevant team is Villanova. They've been dominant, head and shoulders above everybody else. They weren't there. Not to say that these other four schools don't have fan bases, because not only do I think that they do, but I think that their fan bases actually relish the idea of playing at the Palestra and going to see games there. But they've just kind of fallen behind. You look at how these teams, how many times they've appeared in the tournament compared to Villanova, the national success that they've had, the national TV games they play, the big games they play. Unfortunately, they've just fallen behind. And I think that's where part of it is too, is it's the competition itself with the Big Five isn't as competitive as it once was. And because of that, it just starts to lose its luster a little bit when these games aren't battles and they're competitive and they're between nationally relevant teams that are going to be able to make runs in March. It's just not there anymore, unfortunately. So there's a lot to put your finger on with this as far as different factors as to what the turnout was. But to me, yeah, you could switch to a Saturday. You can provide transportation for students, this and that. But if these teams are winning, we're not having this conversation, I guarantee you, because me and you know that with any sport. It could be the LA Rams, who seemingly don't really have fans, yet they're good. Everybody shows up and they sell the place out. I think it comes down to winning.
The Tampa Bay Rays, all of a sudden they make the playoffs and they get fans in.
Exactly. But ultimately, I just think that there's that element that's like, hey, these programs unfortunately just aren't up to Nova's separated themselves so far from everybody else being nationally relevant that maybe it starts to lose its luster just a tad, because these teams aren't competitive and making the tournament and making runs and producing winning seasons and showing consistency. So it's unfortunate. I don't want to have to say that, but I think that's part of the reality here, is that you have these other teams in the Big Five that just aren't winning as much as Villanova. And there's a large gap between Nova and the rest of the Big Five. And it wasn't always that way. And that's what made it so great, was you had these great battles, these great games, and there wasn't too much of a drop off between all the teams in the city.
Yeah, I mean, that's the unfortunate reality, kind of like you mentioned, is that it's not anywhere near where it used to be. I mean, Temple was really, really good in the 80s and 90s and even in the early 2000s. Obviously, under John Chaney, they were at one point the number one team in the country. I forget what year it was. I want to say 88. They made a couple of Elite Eights under John Chaney. They were a really, really good program. And then you had St. Joe's under Phil Martelli when they had Delonte West and Jameer Nelson, and they were probably a few points away from making the Final Four when they were the best team in the country that year. But they had battles in like the early 2000s and late 90s and stuff. I mean, Phil Martelli was there a quarter of a decade. So, they had a lot of success under him. And obviously Nova's been the biggest of those schools, even back in those days, when the other two were putting their foot forward, but they were always in the Big East. So they, were probably always the most nationally recognized program, even though obviously Temple and St. Joe's had their runs too. But it's unfortunate. And obviously they had Penn had a lot of success under Fran Dunphy too. So that was another thing. And LaSalle hasn't really in like 30 years besides the Sweet 16 run. But now it's really just Nova, and now Nova's not playing well this year. So it's unfortunate that it's kind of fallen to this. I'm hoping, listen, I think Nova will be okay in the long run, obviously, but for especially Temple and St. Joe's purposes, I hope that they can get back up to where they were, because, they are historically two great programs. And they would really help out the Big Five's national spotlight if they got back to relevancy, but also even just in the city, because, those are the people who are going to this Big Five doubleheader and these Big Five games, is people in Philly. And obviously in the suburbs and whatnot too, but people in the area. So I'm praying that we can get back to that. But now I want to talk about the actual games that took place on Wednesday, because listen, they were some pretty good games. We'll go to the first one. Temple defeated LaSalle 67-51. They were actually down 29-21 at halftime. Things kind of got away from them at one point. And then all of a sudden they just came storming back. It was led by Caleb Battle, who had 22 on the night. Damian Dunn had a nice bounce back game with 17, 6, and 6. Jamil Reynolds was 10 points, 8 rebounds. So great physical presence on the inside. Temple's a team that actually shot pretty well, 46% from the field, 37% from three. So great showing from them, especially in the comeback win. And then on the South side, it wasn't all bad. Obviously they were winning for a lot of this game. Khalil Brentley was very, very impressive. That was the first thing watching that game that I think I wanted to talk about when we recorded this. He had 14 and 9. That 9 was in rebounds, by the way, not assists, which you'd be surprised about. Just showed athleticism, played with a lot of energy. He was getting in some, it wasn't getting in people's faces, but he was clapping around. He was talking to fans. He was showing that he can be the leader of this team and a stud. And Josias also had 11 points on 5 of 8 from the field. He was kind of the only other real bright spot for LaSalle, but they shot 32%, only 21% from 3. They did have 10 steals, but overall, it was just kind of, once they got to like the middle of the second half, it was like, okay, here's the talent disparity that we talked about with Temple. So what did you see from this game? One that led to LaSalle's, great first half, but then what ultimately led to their downfall and Temple pulling away with this game late?
So in the first half for LaSalle, I love their fight. I love their energy. I thought they came out and they were the team that wanted it more. They played with a lot more energy. They were crashing the glass on offense, just being very active. And I thought they had that over Temple, and that's why they went into the half with the lead that they did. But unfortunately, in the second half for them, Temple just started making shots. Zach Hicks had 3 threes in the second half. That was big. Damian Dunn, like you said, had a bounce back game and was hitting tough shots. I was sitting right near the baseline where Caleb battled in the first half. He just had it going on. He had a shot where the shot clock was about to expire. Ball got tipped away from him. He picks it up and he throws it up and he hits nothing but net. So when you have a guy like that who can really be a microwave scorer and can score in bunches like that when he's feeling it, it's tough to defend that when there's a guy going that has it going on. But at the end of the day, Temple just started making shots in the second half. They started to settle in a little bit. They just started to knock them down, and that's sometimes not that hard. Sometimes in basketball, one team made shots like you said, the other didn't. LaSalle didn't shoot a great percentage at the rim. They really couldn't get many of those shots to fall down low inside in the second half, and that's unfortunately what their undoing was here. Temple just started making shots. They started getting to a groove offensively. Hicks made some big shots for them, and that's just kind of where it got away from LaSalle. But I love their energy. I thought they came out the better team in the first half. The first half I was watching, I said that they to me they won that first half with just their activity, their rebounding on offense, and guys just playing loose and playing very active. So I thought LaSalle had a good first half. That second half, though, at the end of the day, Temple just had more shots go in the basket. They scored more points, and me and you both know that's how you win basketball games. So it wasn't that hard, for me. Like you said, LaSalle, they shot a bad percentage. Temple was knocking down shots in the second half, and that was able to undo a first half that left a lot to be desired from the Owls.
Yeah, I think Temple honestly just got pissed off at the first half, and they started locking up defensively in the second half. I know, obviously things can happen where teams just knock down shots, even if you have the effort defensively, but that wasn't the case for the Explorers. They just simply were not hitting them. But I also think a large part of that was because Temple just said, hey, we cannot lose this game. We've had too many struggles this season. We're better than this team. We have to lock down. And I think they did that. And also, like you said, their shot making was really, really good, which is something that hasn't necessarily been there consistently for the Owls this year. But I was very impressed by that, specifically in this game. Caleb Battle and Damian Dunn. Obviously, we talked about Zach Hicks too. But those are the two guys. We've talked about this all year so far. Those are the two guys. Those are the engine. That's the engine for the Owls. And if they want any type of success this year, those are the guys going to have to get going. I mean, it's also nice to see that Jamil Reynolds, he'll also be that third guy for them who, he's going to be the one. It's like a safety net, like a tight end in the NFL. Like he's there if things aren't going well. So it's a good insurance that they have for this team, but the guards are going to be the reason why they win. But I was very impressed by their defensive effort in the second half. I was also impressed by Caleb Brantley, like I kind of mentioned at the top of this part. What did you see from him that you kind of maybe even haven't seen before, or, something that he really just showed to everyone watching that like, hey, this is me?
So he had a really nice steal and dunk in that first half. And the thing I've always liked about him, what I've been saying since we started doing this pod, good luck trying to stay in front of this guy. I mean, he's so quick with the ball in his hands. His change of direction, his change of speed to get by people. Like he really is a nice player. And for being a guy who's not that big, he's got some springs in his legs to try and dunk on you. think it was in the Queens game earlier this year. I like stood up out of my seat watching the film because this guy tried to dunk on 3 guys that were all taller than him. So he's got some serious pop athletically and can get up there. Like you said, he grabbed a bunch of boards. He'll stick his nose in there. Just a guy that you appreciate because he plays his tail off every night. He plays hard. He's not going to back down from anybody who's bigger, stronger than him. Doesn't matter to him. And I really think he's the best player on this LaSalle team, and he's going to be the engine that drives them with his scoring prowess that we've seen on some nights this season. So, if you haven't seen him already, you don't know too much about him, and you were able to watch him Wednesday night. I hope you know what he's about now because he really is a nice player in the A10 and one of the, in my opinion, one of the best players in the Big Five in this city.
Yeah, I mean, definitely exciting to watch. Like I said, he brought that energy. That steal and dunk he had sequence was kind of crazy. I think he also had a basket before that, so it went from that, and then I forget who threw a bad pass. I want to say it was Hicks or it was Heiser Miller, but threw a bad pass that he just picked off perfectly, dunked the other end, and was just kind of flexing. It was cool to see. You don't get to see a ton of that, I feel like, from LaSalle over the past few years. So to have someone with kind of that, that flair and that talent, it's good. It's good to see. So I was impressed by that. But overall, it was a good game. Honestly, the score will indicate that it wasn't, but that only happened in the last, I want to say, 8 minutes of the game, where Temple just kind of took the reins and said, "We're not losing." So it was definitely a good opening game of the Big Five doubleheader. Now let's go to the closing game of the Big Five doubleheader, which was a really, really good game. It was kind of the opposite, honestly, of what we saw in the first game. So St. Joe's won this one, 85-80 in overtime, over Penn. They were down 27-10 at one point in the first half. People I was sitting with, my friends, our friends that were there with me, we were just kind of like talking, cruising after the first, 10 minutes of that game. We're like, this one seems like it's over. They ended up cutting it all the way. I mean, they cut it down to 7 by the first half. I think they ended the first half down 11. And then the second half, they just kind of took over with their shot making. Penn's defense was abysmal down the stretch of that game. They were not switching on anything. They were letting St. Joe's get behind the bat or get in front of the basket, like right in the paint. It was not great. And then they went to overtime. First of all, Jordan Dingle hitting a shot with 6.7 seconds left in regulation to send it to overtime after Penn went down. Put them ahead in overtime with about a minute left, but then St. Joe's ended up prevailing. Eric Reynolds, 27 points, 7 of 17 shooting, which is kind of a key point that we had talked about in the last episode, that if St. Joe's was going to win this game, it was going to be because of Eric Reynolds providing a flashback scoring game. Not a flashback, you know what I mean, a bounce back scoring game. Kasper Klatchik also had probably his best game at St. Joe's, 19 points of 7 of 13. Lynn Greer poured in with 16 points too. They shot 38% from 3, which, can't complain about. They had 9 steals on Penn. On the flip side, Dingle had 28 points. He took 25 shots in this game. It's a lot. It's a lot of shots, 11 of 25. Slacker at 18 and 5. Nick Spinoso impressed me too. 8, 9, and 11 on the night. Him and Slacker, though, both rolled their ankle later in that game. So that's kind of something to look out for. And then also Holland had 10 points off the bench. And one more stat for you, because it's important. I know I'm rambling here, but there's a lot to talk about from this game. Penn had 17 turnovers. And I know we've talked about turnovers from these Big Fives teams, but that's not going to cut it. So, Cope, my soliloquy is over. What did you see from this game? What caused Penn to blow that 17-point lead in the first half and end up losing to St. Joe's?
So number one, obviously, is the turnovers. But number two, I felt like they were just a little reliant on Jordan Dingle at the end to try and provide them with any sort of offense. Like you said, he took a ton of shots. Obviously, I mean,
25.
that's not a bad guy to take a lot of shots. I mean, he's a legit NBA prospect here, for being honest. But to kind of rely on him like they did in the second half, it's not, for the second half in a game where a guy's going to play a lot of minutes, you're going to ask him to do a lot. The second half, he's maybe going to start to be worn down a little bit when you don't really have anybody else who's got it going on. I thought that Clark Slacker took a couple of really tough shots in this game. That on Saturday when I was at the Cathedral Classic, he was hitting against Colgate. He was hitting some of these tough shots where they try to run him off the dribble handoff. Big Nick Spinoso sets him a good screen, gives him a little bit of daylight to shoot. But fortunately, they weren't falling. But the first half of this game, this offense was flowing very well. Max Martz didn't play in this game, so Ed Holland got a little bit of run and was able to pour in 10 points, hit a couple shots in the first half. But offensively, their movement was terrific. They were getting guys open shots. They were getting guys involved. Jonah Charles hit a three, was doing some good things on offense in this game. Like their offense was terrific in the first half. There was a lot of movement. Guys are getting involved. A lot of different sets. They were able to slow St. Joe's down, playing the half court like Steve Donahue wants to. A lot of cuts, a lot of movement, a lot of different variations of offense going on. And that was able to get them a big lead and be able to get them a lot of open shots. And then the second half, I just felt they were a little reliant on Jordan Dingle. But I also want to talk about how good St. Joe's was here as well, because that was such a gutsy and gritty win for them.
Gutsy.
Down as many as they were. Eric Reynolds did what he had to scoring. As you said, Kasper Klotchik had a really good game, was shooting threes, scoring outside, had some big buckets late in the paint underneath the basket. So it was a great game for him. But these guys, it was just gritty. You know, it was gritty. They had to do it possession by possession. They did what they had to. They played small at times. No Ejike Obina, no Charles Coleman. They played with Klotchik. They played small. Rasheer Fleming gave him some good minutes again, as he's continued to do in his young career. But one guy I want to point out that hasn't played a lot this year that I just thought came in and made the most of his minutes and made some big winning plays was Lewis Bleachmore for St. Joe's. He hit a three. He played with great energy on defense, and he had a huge tip out for an offensive rebound at the end of that game. St. Joe's missed a couple free throws late. They were up one. He tips the ball out to then make it a 3-point game, or to just give them another possession, have the ball shoot some more free throws. So it's these type games where you have to come back and just down. It kind of comes down to who makes more plays, who grinds it out, just who makes more winning plays in the end. And although he didn't play a ton, he hasn't played a ton this year. I thought not only did Lewis Bleachmore make some really good winning plays and play with great energy on defense, but if St. Joe's decides that, hey, we can play small a little bit, we don't need Obina on the lineup, we don't need Coleman, we can go without playing a true big at times, and we can play with Fleming and Klotchik. Thought Lewis Bleachmore really earned himself some more minutes in this game. So lots of like from St. Joe's. Yeah, the first half wasn't great, but very gritty and gutsy second half from them. They had a lot of guys play well, but I wanted to make sure that Lewis Bleachmore got his shine because he made some really good plays in this game to, I think, get him some more time down the stretch here.
Yeah, he was important down the stretch of that game. That tip out was kind of a soul crusher for Penn, because I think they were down one, and that rebound would have given them a chance to go down the court and take the lead. I think win the game. I think that at that point the shot clock was turned off, so it was huge. So shout out to him for that. It was a very high energy game. Actually, teams were getting into it at one point down the stretch of that game. It was a really fun doubleheader, second game of the doubleheader. It was a really good time. I don't think anybody in the stands was even expecting that, especially after the first 10 minutes, where Penn just shot out of a cannon. I mean, they were on a 4-game win streak. They were riding momentum, so you kind of figured, oh, they're here. But St. Joe's had other ideas. So overall, a great, incredible night at the I was going to say the cathedral of college basketball, the Palestra. Real quick before we move on to the weekend games, shout out to Sean, who's a fan of the podcast, came over to me. I was sitting in section 219 and he said, "What's up?" And that was really, really cool. So Sean, shout out to you. Thank you for being a loyal follower and listener. I know Cope couldn't be there because he was working, but I'm glad that we got to chat for a little bit. And, we're going to be at more games coming up. So if any of you guys definitely want to say hi, if you know that we're going to a game, if you want to know if we're going to a game, just hit us up on Twitter, Instagram. We'll definitely get back to you because that was really cool. And we'd love to be able to chat with you guys more often. So yeah, shout out to Sean for that. All right, we're gonna move on to the weekend games. We've got a lot of Saturday games here, so we're gonna get right into it. Now, we already talked about Nova, Oklahoma, but we'll talk a little more in depth about it now that the Big Five doubleheaders in the rearview mirror. So Cope, were there any other thoughts to this game that you maybe didn't mention on episode 6 that you wanted to get into?
So just a couple things here. First with Nova, they've lost 4 in a row. They're coming off their 3-game losing skid out in Portland for the Phil Knight Invitational. But out there, what they didn't do well was knock down threes and knock down shots. Brandon Housen was very good in the Oregon game, but as a team, they didn't shoot the 3 ball well. And unfortunately for them, their opponents were making a lot of threes. So that to me is something that not only for this game we're going to have to monitor, but down the stretch here as well as we wait for Cam Whitmore and Justin Moore to get healthy. It's kind of hard to get a gauge on when Cam Whitmore is going to play. Hell, we might even see him Saturday. I feel like it's just kind of up in the air right now. We don't really know. So maybe we will see him Saturday. Hopefully, we can see him in the foreseeable future. But that's something I want to look at is the 3-point line disparity here. How well will Oklahoma shoot? How well will Villanova shoot? Maybe that ends up determining the game. But this is a really good team. Under Porter Moser, say his second year. Obviously, we know him. He made the great run to the Final Four with Loyola Chicago, and then he ended up making a Sweet 16 with them as well before jumping ship and joining Oklahoma. But this team, they're good defensively, and they like to play slow. A thing about Porter Moser's teams is they run great sets on offense. I marvel at him, and I want to save him and use him for myself and make sure I have him because he's so good at exploiting anything you want to do and really slowing the game down. But they're a good team that wants to play slow. And with Nova, unfortunately for me, I was lauding them for being like, oh, they don't beat themselves up. They don't turn the ball over. Turn the ball over 16 times versus Iowa State, which wasn't good. And that's a team that likes to get after you in the half court, slow the game down, and really grind out possessions. This team is another team that likes to play slow and do that on defense. So we'll see how that holds up for Villanova. And also, we've talked about their point guard play being kind of shaky. They're going up against a very good one in Grant Sherfield here, who's the leading scorer for Oklahoma, averages 5 assists, shoots well from the 3-point line as well. He actually played at Wichita State, starting out his career. I saw him play at Temple one time, and then he was at Nevada last year. But he's a really, really good point guard if you haven't heard about him and what he does. But he's a leading scorer of this team. It's going to be interesting to see how is Nova going to kind of counteract that with their point guard struggles between Chris Arch and Mark Armstrong as they go up against a very good one in Grant Sherfield in Oklahoma here. So it'll be a really good matchup. I love these Big East, Big 12 battles where you have Villanova and some other Big East teams. They're going to end up playing power conference teams. So I think it'll be a good matchup. But a couple of things I wanted to point out there. How is Nova going to do against another good defensive team that likes to play slow? How will the 3-point kind of disparity be? How will we see Nova shoot it? Will they continue to improve? Will they continue to defend the 3-point line the way they are? Can they bring their opponent's percentage down? And then also, how are these point guards going to fare against Grant Sherfield, who, whether it was Wichita State, whether it was Nevada last year, guy's a pretty damn good point guard. So we'll see how that matchup goes.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting. They haven't really had the Cats to, no pun intended, they haven't really had the Cats to, match up with teams with kind of that talent at the guard position. Obviously Caleb Williams is there, but he's more, I feel like he's more of a 2 guard. So for the one spot, matching up with someone like Sherfield's going to be tough. And also you mentioned Porter Moser. I mean, loved him when he was at Loyola Chicago. Those teams were gritty and fun, but they weren't like firepower offensive teams. They were actually quite the opposite. They were extremely well coached defensive teams who grinded out victories, who won games like 50-49 or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see them going up against this Nova team who has not shot particularly well from the 3-point line, like you mentioned. So look out for that. I don't even know who I think is going to win this game because Nova's just been struggling so much. I don't know. I think I'm going to take Oklahoma. I do. As much as it pains me to say, I don't want to go against Big 5 schools, but this is one of those games where if you're Villanova, prove it to people that you're still the top team in the Big 5 that people think you are. I mean, obviously you're not going to win the Big 5 itself, but like in terms of talent, prove that against the Power 5 team who, has talent and good coaching. So that'll be an interesting one. Another game that's interesting this weekend, Temple versus VCU. Temple taking on another A10 school. Of course, they used to be in the A10 themselves. This VCU team pretty much has one guy, and that guy may or may not be playing. I'm going to let you talk about that a little bit. Obviously, Temple coming off their win against LaSalle in the Big 5 doubleheader. So they're kind of riding on a little bit of a high note. They've won a couple straight at this point. So they're starting to improve. But what are you expecting in this one?
So, kind of, I'm going to talk about the same point we talked about the St. Joe's preview with who they're playing. But with Temple, they're just kind of wishy-washy here. They're kind of hot and cold. They win a game, they lose a game, they win a game, they lose a game. I want to see him string together some wins. This is a pretty damn good team in the Atlantic 10 here in the VCU Rams. So I want to see Temple not play as dead as they were in the first half, because I really did feel like LaSalle just wanted it more and was ultimately the better team in that first half. But I want to see this team be consistent. I think they can be really good. I want them to show people that, string together some wins here, beat some teams that are pretty solid. You know, VCU, like I said, is a pretty good team in their conference. So I just want to see some consistency from them. Pound the ball inside a little bit with Jamil Reynolds. He's got the size advantage playing against Jalen Deloach of VCU. But yeah, to your point, and it's not, I don't want to say VCU is one guy because they did get two Michigan transfers in here, and Zeb Jackson and Brandon Johns. But this team kind of goes as Ace Baldwin goes. And he's had some injury troubles the last couple of years. Last year, he was coming off a major knee injury where he didn't return until a couple games into the season. You know, VCU kind of had to wait for him to come back. They dropped a couple games in the non-conference slate because he didn't play, and they had to play some young guys behind him. But he really is like the steadying presence of this team. He doesn't turn the ball over. He is one of the best on-ball defenders in the country. You know, shocker, VCU's got good guys who defend on the ball.
How
But
about that?
he's a terrific point guard, man. He's quick. He's a great ball handler. He's a good point guard, a tone setter, and a guy that if they want to press, he's going to be at the top. He's going to be in your face. But he unfortunately just fractured his right wrist. He got a couple screws in there. Guy said he's got a high pain tolerance, so only sat out for a couple games. VCU was able to kind of stay afloat while he was out. But that's the player on VCU. That's the guy you want to watch. If this guy has a dominant game and he's harassing Hyseer Miller and he scores a lot on offense and is dishing out assists, could be a long day for Temple. But that to me is really the key. This team goes as Ace Baldwin goes because he's really that good of a player. We'll see how Temple's able to neutralize him. Will they want to throw Hyseer Miller on him for the whole game? Will they want to throw some other guys at him and have a bunch of different guys defend him with their length and try and bother him? Maybe Zach Hicks, Jaleel White if they want. So we'll see how Temple decides to play him. But that really is, to me, the matchup in this game I want to watch because we've seen Hyseer Miller pour in 20. We've also seen him struggle a little bit and have some bad games that I felt like if he had a good game, Temple really would be able to win some of them. So that's, to me, that's your matchup right there. If Hyseer Miller has a good game, Temple wins. But if he struggles mightily, and on the flip side, Ace Baldwin's able to really dominate this game on both ends, then I think you could be looking at a Temple loss. I will take Temple to win because I think they have the athletes and the size to overcome that. But I'm just saying, if you don't know about Ace Baldwin, this guy is a really, really good player on both ends of the floor, and he's kind of a do-it-all guy for them on offense.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think Jaleel White would be a great person to guard Ace Baldwin. He's got the length, and he's one of Temple's, if not Temple's best on-ball defender on the perimeter. So that'll be a really interesting matchup. I'm going to agree with you. I do think Temple's going to end up winning this game, though I have been wrong before on this Temple Owls team. They have been inconsistent, especially when there's, some talent on the other team at the guard position. But I think they might be starting to figure things out. And I think that comeback against LaSalle kind of showed me something. They were down 8. LaSalle was playing well. They were not giving them easy shots. And then all of a sudden in the second half, things changed. They flipped the switch. So I think if they keep that switch on for this VCU game, I don't think Ace Baldwin and the Rams will be a problem. But they just have to make sure they're continuing to do the right things. Obviously, shot making is huge in this one too. So if they do that and they limit the turnovers, I think good things can happen. So I will take Temple in this one, though. I think it'll be close, but I'm going to take the Owls. All right. St. Joe's, Fairleigh Dickinson, also this weekend. St. Joe's coming off a really, really big win, really emotional win against Penn. Second game of that Big 5 doubleheader, like we mentioned. Fairleigh Dickinson, not so hot. Not a good team. Then again, St. Joe's did lose to South Florida when we thought that they were not a good team. And they did not pull out that victory like we kind of said if they don't, then it's not good. And it's not good. But then they ended up beating Penn. So things turned around for them a little bit there. But what do you see in this matchup for the Hawks against this Fairleigh Dickinson squad?
So again, like I said, I was going to stress this point with St. Joe's as well. Great win for them Wednesday, no doubt about it. Very gritty, gutsy, like I said. I want to see them start to try and string together some here as well. I think you can start that against a Fairleigh Dickinson team that they really should beat. I mean, major problems like sound the alarm bad if they lose this one because the last few years this team just hasn't been great defensively. They rank toward the bottom in Ken Palm, and not only defense, but they're one of the very bottom teams in 2-point defense this year as well. I'm looking for guys to get inside and drive the lane. If your centers, if you compound the ball inside a little bit with Obino and get him back because he didn't have a great game and didn't play a ton of minutes that we're used to seeing him play on Wednesday, maybe you try and get him going again. But if not, and you decide to play small, like I thought it actually worked out for them playing with Rasheer Fleming and Kasper Klaczyk, maybe you try and do that as well. So for me in this game, I'm looking for St. Joe's to take advantage of a team that defensively just is not good and statistically ranks as one of the worst in Division One. But in particular, I want to see like, hey, maybe this small ball thing they do where they don't play with a natural big actually works and they can get some offensive production out of it. They can switch. I thought Klaczyk and Rasheer Fleming this year have switched pretty effectively on ball screens. So to me, that's one thing I'm going to be looking for. Is Lewis Bleachmore going to play a little bit more? Are we going to see more smaller guys play, more smaller lineups from this team? And maybe they can have some success with it. So against a team that's pretty bad defensively, they should have a good game. And maybe that allows Billy Lang to experiment with some different lineups here, play guys a little bit more than they have this season, maybe play a little bit smaller because, like I said, if that's a formula that they think is effective, allows them to switch more on defense and just play more versatile and spread the floor a little bit more. Maybe this is something that St. Joe's continues to do a little bit more.
Yeah. I think for me, it's two things. I think number one, first and foremost, Eric Reynolds continuing to have his foot on the gas when it comes to being the leader of this team. He showed it against Penn. He brought them back or helped bring them back. It wasn't just him, but he had led them with 27 points. I think having him play consistently, playing to the level that we know he can, is big, even against Fairleigh Dickinson, even though statistically they are really not good at all. But this is one of those games that, people call them get right games, right? You're playing against a team that you probably should beat. Maybe you haven't been doing so, although they obviously just came off a very nice win. But before that, not so much. This is one of those games where like prove to me that you can continue to be the guy who you are. So that's number one. Number two, I want to see more Rasheer Fleming play. He, just kind of starting to get more minutes in these last few games, and it's great to see. I think he can be a difference maker. I'm not saying he's going to have to start. They have guys who are obviously going to start over him, but being that sixth man off the bench, I think would be huge for them. Give them some more size, give them some more scoring. So, excuse me, but I think that he would be this would be a nice game for him as well against a subpar team to, kind of show that he can be a guy who can contribute to the St. Joe's team, not just in a small capacity, in a much larger capacity, which I think, you've talked about it too. I think it's something that we both want to see. I think it's something that everyone on Hawk Hill wants to see. So I definitely think that's something that Billy Lang should probably try to implement, kind of what you just alluded to with experimenting with different things. I think this is one of those games, but also don't overlook your opponent because that does not ever go well for anybody ever. So take this team seriously, but also this is a game you should win. Like you said, experiment with some things, see what lineup combinations work and whatnot. So that's all I got for that one. Now we have the final game that we're going to go over for this weekend is an inner Big Five matchup. So I wanted to save the best for last. LaSalle taking on Penn at the Palestra, 2:00 on Saturday, I believe, right? 2:00 on Saturday. Are you going to that game first and foremost? I know you talked about it with me personally, but are you going to that game tomorrow?
Yes.
Saturday.
Yes. I will be working. I'm going to have to work, unfortunately. I'm still going to be able to be on the court and
right.
And be, in the bleachers on the sidelines. But I'll be there this Saturday. I'll be there next Saturday for Temple to play at Penn. So next 2 Saturdays for me, I'll be down to Palestra watching some Big Five basketball. But in this game, I have one thing in particular that applies to both these teams and that I'm going to be looking for, which I think will decide our winner here. And that's who's going to play the more complete game. Because I thought we saw LaSalle and Penn play pretty good first halves, both of them. LaSalle, a lot of energy, a lot of activity. To me, they were just a better team that wanted it more, that was being more active, that had more energy. And then with Penn, guys were getting in a groove. Ed Holland had made some shots. Jonah Charles made some shots. Dingle, Slacker, right off the bat, they started getting open looks and knocking down shots. And I also thought Nick Spinoza made some really good passes in the first half. That's something that kind of goes a little underrated, I think, under the radar with Penn is, like Max Lorca Lloyd is long. He can block shots. He's good defensively inside in the paint. can be an anger for them. But Nick Spinoso's a guy that he's very big, he's solid, he's going to set good screens for Dingle and Slacker to get open, but he's a tremendous passer as well for a big guy. They
I was
can
very impressed with him the other night.
hand the ball off on the perimeter, or he can face up at the basket. He can hit a guy cutting very quickly. So he kind of opens up a lot for Penn on offense with his passing ability. But for me, I'll get back to what my point was going to be here is who's going to put together a complete game, because Penn ended up losing in overtime in a game where, to me, they should. When you have a lead that almost hits 20, you got to be able to win that game. You can't take your foot off the gas. And then with LaSalle, unfortunately, they just didn't make shots, and it wasn't a complete 40 minutes for them because of that. Their energy, their activity, it's great and it's awesome. I love that. I love that they're feisty and they play with that sort of demeanor, but it just didn't hit shots. Get some to fall through here. Maybe try and get some better looks. I thought a couple shots were sometimes questionable. Some of the decisions weren't great as far as maybe a turnover or a forced shot. So maybe we try and do that a little. We can try and get better looks, and that will lead to some more makes. But for me, who's going to play the more complete 40 minutes? That's who's going to end up winning here. I'm sure both these teams are going to really want to put together, obviously, a W here and put together a full game, because they didn't. And I'm sure both teams actually feel like they could have won on Wednesday night. So they're right back at it for LaSalle. How about that? 2 games in a row at the Palestra for them. But hey, it's two hungry teams in the Big Five that are coming off a loss. They're going to want to take it out on another Big Five team. And for me, whoever plays the more complete game, whoever plays the closest to a complete 40 minutes, regardless of what that means, if that's defense, if that's offense, hitting shots, getting good looks, turning the other team over, whoever plays the more complete game for me will come out the victor, because both these teams only played a good half, only played a good 3 quarters on Wednesday. And I think that's why both these teams weren't victorious.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, both these teams definitely felt like they should have won those games. I mean, I could not imagine anyone in either locker room not being salty or having a bad taste in their mouth about how those games ended, especially Penn, because they were up the most and they went to overtime and they had the chance to redeem themselves and they blew it. So I definitely think, and it's on their home floor too, even though obviously technically neutral site, but that they're going to want to look bounce back. Again, just like we talked about against for the LaSalle Temple game, it's the same thing with LaSalle this time. It's the guard matchups. They got Slackard and Dingle on the one side. Obviously, they're a very talented combo. And LaSalle has guys. I mean, Nickelberry kind of was a no-show in this game against Penn. Brantley played well. So you're going to need those guys to show up against this Penn team, because Jordan Dingle is going to show up. Jordan Dingle is going to get his shots, number one. I mean, obviously we saw he shot the ball 25 times. Granted, that was with an extra period, but still. And Slacker's going to get his shots off, and he's a scoring machine too. So they're going to need to find a way to stop those guys, and they're going to need find a way to generate some offense themselves. And also, the John May twins weren't really involved that much against Temple either, which credit to Temple for, taking some of these guys out of the game with their defense, like we mentioned earlier. But going to need to see those guys, because Penn isn't the longest team in the world. They don't have a ton of length. Spinoso, to what you were saying, played phenomenal, I thought, the other night. I thought he was one of the reasons why they stayed in that game down the stretch when things were kind of falling apart for them. But it's going to be, these teams, they're similarly, I don't want to say similarly built, because Dingle and Slacker, I think, are better than anyone else on LaSalle. And they do a bulk of the scoring. I think LaSalle scoring is kind of dispersed between the team. But in terms of like the roster construction of the size and everything, I think they're pretty similarly built. So it's just it's the war of attrition, honestly. I mean, it's who's going to make the shots, who's going to play the better defense, who's going to show the better effort. And to your point, who's going to play the complete 40 minutes. That's what it's going to come down to. So very much looking forward to this game. Oh, and who's not going to turn the ball over, because both these teams have a tendency to turn the ball over. So it's going to be a heck of a game. I'm really looking forward to it. I do think Penn comes out on top. I think it'll be a relatively close game. I did come on here and say that Penn was going to win by double digits against St. Joe's, and it looked like they were well on their way. And then it did not happen. Our friend Matt Dunn kind of called me out on that. So shout out to him for that. But yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting game at the Palestra on Saturday. 2 o'clock p.m. So if you're in the Philly area, definitely try to go to that one. That's going to be an exciting one. Other than that, I mean, we got everything we talked about here. It was a heck of a week for the Big Five. It's going to be a heck of a weekend for the Big Five. Do you have anything last thoughts you want to add?
So I actually wanted to ask you for your thoughts on the Palestra. That was your first time there.
Yes, it
What did you
was.
think? Did you get to walk around a little bit, kind of take it all in?
Yeah, I did. It was really cool. It was kind of everything I expected it to be, honestly, which is a good thing because I had some pretty high expectations. But I did get the chance to walk around during halftime of the Temple of Sal game. I was hungry, so me and our friend Anthony DeBundo, we went to go walk around, get some food. We got some Chickies and Pete's, then the little stand there in the corner. I forget exactly what sections it was near. I want to say like around 200, but it was really cool. They had the murals of the decades of different teams and high school players who have come through there. They had opponent coaches and players that they faced throughout the years at the Palestra. It was really cool. You just kind of got the sense that this place was important to college basketball, which you don't get to say that for everywhere in terms of their relative sport. Not everywhere is the cathedral of something. So being at the cathedral of college basketball, it was really, really cool. And the gym itself was cool. It was intimate, like we've talked about. My back did hurt from the bleachers. I have back problems though, so that might be take that with a grain of salt. But it was cool. I mean, you got the sense that like I kind of just alluded to, there was just a lot of important basketball played there, and this is a very unique place. So I was very, very happy to be at the Palestra. And I will obviously very much definitely be going back very, very soon. I'm aiming to I'll be out of town for the LaSalle Penn game, for the Temple Penn game next week. I should be there. So I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, the Palestra was really cool, and I'm very glad I finally got to go. And I can say that's off my list now. So the monkey is off the back. Kyle Morello has been to the Palestra. So there we go. Alrighty. Well, on that note, that's all for this silly little show. Thank you all for tuning in and liking, subscribing, all that fun stuff, following. So we appreciate that. Make sure to continue or to do so if you haven't already. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and make sure you check out our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we really appreciate the support that we've been getting, and hopefully we'll continue to get. So appreciate you all. Cope, appreciate you as always. You know that though. And yeah, until next week, we'll see you guys later.